There's a sportsbook with a GameStop level issue on its hands and nobody's talking about it. To understand what I mean by this, let me introduce you to two entities. The first is the ATC projection system, which is the most accurate projection system in all of baseball for the past 5 years running. And the second, which it is currently exposing, is the Bovada sportsbook, which is an online sportsbook based out of Latvia. Yes, we're going deep for this one. So now that you know the two parties involved, let's look at the problem and see how you can take advantage of this situation to make a little bit of money. And it lies with the fact that the sportsbook has set its ERA player props for the 2024 MLB season too low for every single player. Now, I know that's an outlandish claim, but let's look at a few. For example, Garrett Cole's ERA line is set at 3.15 over under. ATC, on the other hand, has a projected ERA at 3.50, which is the lowest of the bunch. That is a huge differential of almost half a run. Here's another example. Dodgers' new ace, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, set at 3.40 ERA, whereas ATC has him at 3.73, which is again another positive differential of about 0.35. And again, the lower end of the spectrum for the other projection model. And here's Aaron Nola of the Philadelphia Phillies, who has his ERA line set at 3.55 by Bovada, whereas ATC has him projected at 3.89, a plus 0.4 differential. And you might be thinking that these are just cherry-picked examples, but when you look at all the other instances, in every single one of them, there's a positive differential between what ATC, the most accurate projection system in baseball, has versus what Bovada has set the line at. Again, Garrett Cole's ATC ERA was 3.50, while his Bovada line is set at 3.15, a differential of plus 0.35. And it's not even the highest of all these differentials. But in order to turn this into meaningful betting advice, we need to take these ERA differentials and turn them into probabilities that the over actually hits. And that's what this graph does by taking ATC's historical margin for error and using that to simulate the 2024 MLB season 10,000 times for every single one of these pitchers. So a bar height of 72% means that after 10,000 simulations of Garrett Cole's 2024 MLB season, about 7,200 of those times he hit the over. So you might be thinking that you would be most confident to place a bet in a guy like Kodai Senga versus a guy like Tyler Glasnow. But what you have to take into consideration is the odds that Bovada has set for each one of these lines is not even. And what I mean by that is that if we take a look back at what Garrett Cole's line is set up on Bovada, he has negative 125 for the over and negative 105 for the under, meaning that there's going to be a worse payout for the over versus the under. That has to do with the implied probabilities, because odds of negative 125 means that the bet should have about a 55% chance of hitting. Odds of negative 105 means that the bet should have a 51% chance of hitting in order for it to be a net neutral EV play. So what we need to do with Garrett Cole's 72% chance of hitting in order to figure out how much of a positive EV play this is subtract 72% minus 55% implied odds. Which once you do that, you see that you have a plus EV advantage of about 17%. So to figure out which of these overs are actually going to be the most advantageous, we need to take all of these bars and subtract the implied probabilities from the sportsbook's odds. And when we do this, we get this graph, which is the probability advantage over the sportsbook for every single player. Remember, Garrett Cole had a 17% advantage. And now that we see this, we see that Aaron Nola is actually the highest probability advantage at 19%. And that's because if we look back at his odds again, his over and under are actually set at the same negative 115. Combine that with the fact that we're already 72% confident that his over was going to hit, and you have the biggest advantage over the sportsbook in this instance. So personally, I like to minimize risk, and I'd probably take any of the plus 10% probability advantages. And the only reason I phrase it as a hypothetical like that is not because I'm not confident in making these bets, because I did place a slip. But in between me placing the slip and filming this video, Bovada is already changing its line. When I first started this analysis, Corbin Burnes was set at an ERA of 3.10 over under on Bovada. And his odds, like Aaron Nola, were also set at negative 115 for the over and the under. But since making that graph, his over-under line has actually been increased from 3.10 all the way up to 3.30, and his odds have been decreased from negative 115 to negative 125. Sportsbook is catching on in real time. I mean, I was already trying to place my bets fast, and I was getting a ton of errors because they were changing the odds all over the place. For example, Grayson Rodriguez's ERA is up from 3.0 to 3.55 now. This is a very time-sensitive play, but it also has a pretty good chance of being a positive EV play as well. Again, you can go to Bovada and place these lines. Hopefully they haven't changed too many of them by the time you see this video. And if you like this content, please follow for more.